Today, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Western art history. Aliens, Medusas, sword-fighting snails, puffy wigs, and polka dot rooms will be included. Let's commence. The prehistoric period can be traced back as far as 40,000 BC until around 4000 BC. The term prehistoric refers to the time before written history. Prehistoric art provides some of the few surviving records of life from that era and gives us clues about the past. Many scholars sensibly view the rock paintings and sculptures as representations of humans living alongside animals and reflecting the spiritual beliefs of the time. However, some people get a little imaginative, suggesting that these artworks represent aliens or UFOs that once visited Earth. There are entire conspiracy theories about this. It's wild. Most people simply see these figures as representations of God, but it's fun to speculate. Next came ancient art. Ancient art made by advanced ancient civilizations, spanned from 30,000 BC to 400 AD. Within that period came classical art. Classical art was incredibly important, so much so that two later art movements wanted to emulate it. It's like the Beyoncé of art movements. Classical art originated in Greece and Rome, spanning from about 500 BC to 323 BC, ending with the fall of the Roman Empire. Classical art was all about perfection. Artists aimed to depict the ultimate in both realism and beauty. It developed alongside the introduction of democracy, which is reflected in the art's focus on human individuality, achievement, and man's relationship with the gods. The gods, however, were depicted as being just like humans but with immortal powers, and so their representations are often intense, emotional, fantastical, sometimes violent, and a little creepy. So in direct contrast to the beauty and perfection of classical art is the weirdness that is medieval art, spanning from 500 to 1400 AD. This was the art period of muscly babies, sword-fighting rabbits, nightmare lions, and vengeful animals. Medieval art was fever dream level imaginative, often depicting fantasy tales. It's also known for looking kinda not great. The quality of the paintings and drawings seems to have taken a hit. But it's not that people forgot how to paint well. It's just that medieval art was often funded by the church, which was more concerned with using art to teach life lessons, morals, and values than with creating beauty or awe. The art was meant to teach, not to inspire or be beautiful in its own right. This is why medieval art is often found in the margins of medieval texts, a practice known as marginalia. So when you are drawing the margins of a textbook, you are actually being quite medieval. Something that can be confusing is that medieval texts often depict people doing things that were considered morally wrong. The idea, though, was that the art was meant to scare people away from such actions, like a warning. As for the muscular babies, well, many depictions of babies were of baby Jesus. The church believed Jesus was born fully formed, just very small, so they would depict him like a little man. This concept was called homunculus. Say that 10 times really quickly. After the medieval period, from the 1400s to the 1600s, came the Renaissance, meaning rebirth. They were rebirthing their interest in classical Greek and Roman art. Remember, I told you everyone wants to be like the classics. So the Renaissance was inspired by classical art and focused on beauty, realism, harmony, and proportion. But their themes are a little different. While the Greeks and Romans depicted pagan gods, the Renaissance art largely showed Catholic religious scenes. The Renaissance also incorporated scientific and technological revolutions, which is why an artist like Leonardo da Vinci, who painted, was also designing flying machines in his spare time. After the Renaissance period, between 1600 and 1770, came Baroque and Rococo art. These movements are often grouped together because they share some similarities and happen consecutively, so we'll talk about them at the same time. The main thing to know about these art movements is that they are extra. They are all about more is more and being as fancy as possible. It was also about money. The Protestants did not encourage religious art and believed in being conservative with money. So the Catholics, part of their Counter-Reformation, made lots of expensive, flashy art. To the Catholics, this was an important part of engaging people with Catholicism. This can be seen not only in the artworks, but also in the architecture. Lots of gold, lots of moldings. Rococo was similarly extra, but not as religiously centered. Instead, it focused on the wealth and lifestyle of French aristocrats. This was a time when the middle class wasn't really a thing. People were either crazy wealthy or very poor. Crazy rich aristocrats, you might say. It was definitely a wealth flex and often depicted the wealthy courting or at leisure. They used lots of gold and pastels and illustrated unusual luxury fashions like those unforgettable wigs. Rococo was also a bit scandalous, as it often depicted forbidden love, such as love triangles or illicit affairs. Neoclassical art was the second major throwback to classical Greek and Roman art and was prominent from 1750 to 1850. It emerged after archaeological excavations of classical artworks renewed people's interest in this period of art history. It brought a renewed appreciation for the idealism, grandeur, and perfection of Greek and Roman art, and neoclassical artists tried to emulate this, even directly borrowing some motifs like Greek myths and heroes. However, it was different in that it was also inspired by the scientific and philosophical advancements of the Enlightenment. Themes of rationality, civic virtue, and moral clarity were common. Neoclassical art spread quickly through Europe as a result of a custom called the Grand Tour. This was when young men of age would travel around Europe to become more cultured. Basically, the old-timey version of Eurotrip or schoolies. The boys would visit Rome and Greece, see the art, and then return home to spread the word. Romanticism was also prominent from 1750 to 1850 and was sort of a reaction against neoclassicism. Romanticism rejected the rationalism promoted by the Enlightenment and neoclassical art in favor of a moral outlook known as individualism. The Romantics were all about embracing passion, intuition, emotions, and the sublime. Just look at this man, deep in thought, pondering intuitive and emotional feelings in the natural landscape. Oh, and they were all about nature and the power of the natural world. The next big art period is modernism. Modernism started around the late 1800s until the mid-1900s. Modernism has so many other art movements within it, it's basically one of those Russian nesting dolls. Impressionism, post-impressionism, Fauvism, Cubism, Futurism, Expressionism, Dadaism, Surrealism, Constructivism, Minimalism, lots of isms. The defining characteristic of modernism was a break from realistic representation in favor of more abstracted forms. This started out relatively subtle with the Impressionists and became more radical and unrecognizable over time. There was also more experimentation with style, color, and form, along with a questioning of what actually defines art. For example, the Dada artist Marcel Duchamp placed a urinal in a gallery, signed it, and called it art. Postmodern art refers to the period from the mid to late 1900s. Postmodernism continued the tradition of questioning what art is, particularly through mixing of high art with low art, such as commercial art, advertisements, comics, and products. Postmodern art also questioned the importance of the artist's hand. For instance, the artist Andy Warhol began having assistants create artworks for him under his direction. There was a rise in new art forms such as video art, performance art, and conceptual art. Appropriation, using or reinterpreting other artworks, became a common technique often employed in playful, ironic, or sardonic ways. Lastly, we have contemporary art. Contemporary art refers to the art of today, spanning from the 1970s until now, and is a bit of a mishmash. Its defining feature is that it doesn't have a clear ideology or singular defining structure like many of the past isms. Instead, it encompasses a wide range of forms, processes, themes, and ideas. You'll find rooms full of polka dots, a shark in a tank, meat suits, and headless figures engaged in the showdown. Some commonalities in contemporary art are its increasing globalization and cultural diversity. It often explores themes of identity, memory, the body, technology, and politics. Okay, that's it. You know everything there is to know about art. Education done.